Yes, Charles, we as a spiritual family had the privilege recently to celebrate with the Barnard family, with Rian and Dominique, and just for what God had done for them when He had raised little John Luke from the dead after he had drowned. And we rejoiced with them because they are beloved part of our family, they part of our eldership in church, and great personal friends to me and my family. As I prepared for what my message would be after Rian and Dominique had shared their testimony in church, I felt that the Holy Spirit laid it on my heart to not only speak to the miracle that the Lord had done and celebrate that, but also what came to mind was Romans 12, verse 15, which says that we rejoice with those who rejoice and we weep with those who weep. And I was very aware of the fact that although at that moment we as a congregation were rejoicing with the Barnards, there were others in our church that faced similar circumstances but with a different outcome. And that of course brings questions to people, and we struggle with that and we try to understand, and oftentimes people want to understand, did the Barnards, did they figure out a formula? Was faith, did they just engage faith in a way that pleased God and that's why it happened? And if I didn't have the same outcome, was it that I was without faith? So if you think of faith, of course you think of the great faith chapter, Hebrews 11, and it starts by saying, verse 1 says that faith is a substance of things hoped for, evidence of things not seen. Verse 6 says that without faith it's impossible to please God, because he who goes to God must believe that He is and the rewarder of those who diligently seek Him. So we often refer to those two scriptures, but it's not often that we read the whole passage to understand what the Bible actually says about the great heroes of faith. So I'd like to read a passage from verse 30 to verse 40, or actually verse 39 of Hebrews 11, and then just read a commentary that Jack Hayford makes in the Spirit-Filled Life Bible, just based on this passage of Scripture, which I think brings great biblical perspective. So Hebrews 11 from verse 30 says, "By faith the walls of Jericho fell down after they were encircled for 7 days. By faith the harlot Rahab did not perish with those who did not believe, when she received the spies with peace. And what more shall I say? For the time would fail me to tell of Gideon and Barak, and Samson and Jephthah, also of David and Samuel and the prophets, who through faith subdued kingdoms, worked righteousness, obtained promises, stopped the mouths of lions, quenched the violence of fire, escaped the edge of the sword, out of weakness were made strong, became valiant in battle, turned to flight the armies of the aliens." Verse 35 says, "Women received their dead raised to life again," which is exactly what we experienced with Rian and Dominique. But then it goes on to say the following, which seems to be contradictory, because now it goes into those who seemingly had a different outcome. It says, "Others were tortured, not accepting the deliverance, that they might obtain a better resurrection. Still others had trial of mockings and scourgings, yes, and of chains and imprisonment. They were stoned, they were sown in two, were tempted, were slain with the sword. They wandered about in sheepskins and goatskins, being destitute, afflicted, and tormented, of whom the world was not worthy. They wandered in deserts and in mountains, in dens and caves of the earth. And all of these, having obtained a good testimony through faith, did not receive the promise." So as I said, it seemingly is contradictory, because the first heroes of the faith had great outcome, the others had, from our perspective, not such a great outcome, but yet all of them are included in the great cloud of witnesses that Hebrews 12 continues to speak of. So all of them are part of the cloud of witnesses. So here's what Jack Hayford says about this passage. He says, "The fact that others were tortured and suffered in various other ways indicates that faith does not provide an automatic exemption from hardships, trials, or tragedy. Furthermore, the experience of such difficulties does not mean that the people undergoing them possess less faith than those who are not afflicted. The same faith that enables some to escape trouble enables others to endure it. The same faith that delivers some from death enables others to die victoriously. Faith is not a bridge over troubled waters, but it is a pathway through them. I think that is wonderful biblical perspective. I'll just mention one more example. In Acts chapter 12, Peter, when imprisoned, by his faith and trust in the Lord, and steadfast determination not to compromise on the gospel, that resulted in his chains falling from his hands and him walking free. But then you go to earlier on to Acts 7, where Stephen, the first Christian martyr, is stoned to death. Now, he was a man of faith. And for us, if we look at that incident with Stephen, and we consider him as this man of God preaching the gospel, and they come to kill him, from our perspective, we would expect that the answer of his faith, the result of his faith, would be that those who stood with the stones would drop the stones and walk away. That's what we would consider the answer to the prayer, or the result of the faith. But the opposite happens. He is still stoned to death. But while he's dying, he sees heaven opened. His face shines with the glory of God, and he says, Lord, forgive them. They don't know what they do. So, God doesn't always give us an answer, but it does give us perspective. So for some of us, we might have been trusting the Lord for something and we didn't see the answer that we expected. But I want to encourage everyone with this. If you would keep your eyes on Jesus, the author and the finisher of your faith, if you would keep your heart soft and yielded to the Lord, then in the absence of the answer, God will still bring you perspective. And in the end, if we allow God to do that, then whether we find our answer or not, God is still glorified. And we have a peace that surpasses understanding. And that is what I'd like to encourage everyone with.
Amen.
Amen.
That's powerful.